Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 5 p.m. Tuesday, July 28, 2015, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Dr. Edmonds? Mr. Meeks? Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Dr. Whitaker? Mayor Wright?
Here. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council. Our first item on your work session agenda today is an update on the Behavioral Healthcare Services building. I'm going to ask James Wright if he would come and lead us through this briefing. As you know, we started this project in the early part of 2014, and the good news is it's under budget. The tough news is that it's been a long time coming and it's overdue in terms of construction deadlines because of a number of issues that we ran into. But we are now finally on the verge of calling the final completion date and starting the relocation of the BHS functions into that building. So let me cue it up with James.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm going to give you a brief update of the construction for the BHS building. Okay, you're going to see some critical dates here. As many of you know, this project's been around since 2004. The first part of 2013, we entered into a design contract, which leads us to November of 2013, when we gave the notice to proceed to construct the building as you see out there today. At the very beginning of the project, there were some issues getting out of the ground due to the weather, so there were some weather delays that you see. About this time last year, we recognized there were some issues with some of the precast panels on the exterior of the building. As you step through it, you see there's been correspondence back and forth between the city and the contractor over this issue, and it still to this day remains an issue approximately.
What are the issues?
And I'll get to that when I get to the next slide, but it's basically a specification issue. So we've given the contractor several notices of if there's issues with the work. We've notified them of liquidated damages. We're to the point. Finally, now that we're at a substantial completion stage, with final completion with the exception of this one item around August the 3rd, and we're still working with the contractor for some of these items. And so I'm going to go through some of the items here. It's a specification issue. You find that some of the precast panels are out of spec. There are gaps, joint width tolerances. There are alignment issues, color issues, misalignment. So approximately 19 to 20% of the panels, they're probably 500 pounds on the building, 140 or so have issues, predominantly at the corners, so they're very visible. And these are issues that we continue to work through. It's not a structural issue, it's more of a cosmetic issue, so the structural integrity of the building is fine. It just doesn't look good at these locations where we're having issues with the panels. We do have a move-in schedule. The special systems should be complete by the end of this week. That affects alarms, controlled access to the building. There's some licensing that needs to go on with regulatory agencies, phone migration and PC setup. And the BHS staff will start to move in August 10th. And they'll roll in through different departments moving into the building. Final move in somewhere about the middle of September. You'll see a summary of the expenditures. What you see in the budget item, that was the original engineer's estimate for the project, and so those were the engineering estimates. What you see in that middle column, the total encumbrance, those are the actual dollar figures on purchase orders for those specific phases of the projects. And to that far column, you see the totals that have been expended. Down at the bottom, you'll see the balance due to the contractor, with change orders for construction just under 4%. That contingency line item is basically what we think it'll take, that $42,000 right there, to get us to the completion of the project. I'll answer any specifics that you have about any part of that.
Is there any danger when the people start moving in as to why they're still trying to straighten up the blocks that are out of alignment with heavy equipment around?
No, sir. Those areas would be cordoned off similar if you were doing the exterior of an existing building now. So as they're working on those sections where they need scaffold or boom equipment, those areas will be sectioned off and won't be accessible to the public.
So they need not to worry about being unsafe there.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
What time limit have we imposed on the contractor to get it done, and what leverage? Hopefully we've addressed it pretty strongly.
Like I said, we have monies held. We have information given to them by the attorney's office, and some of those dates are still in flux as we're doing correspondence back and forth, and so that final date has not been set yet.
I take it these problems were identified as the project was being constructed, so even though it's at completion, they still haven't been fixed.
Correct.
Which leads me to bring up again the project, the Public Works project that's going on in phases. The brickwork on some of these streets is atrocious. Weeds are growing up through it, which tells me that the bedding, the sand and all wasn't done properly. Hopefully we come back on these contractors and make sure we're getting our dollars worth, make sure the project's being done right.
Yes, sir. And as a matter of fact, we'd like to discuss with you in closed session, as it may be a matter of pending litigation, how we can get this work completed to our satisfaction. So we have, when we get to the closed session motion, there's an appropriate section for that we'd like to discuss in closed session.
How much money are we withholding?
You see right there, just about $350,000.
The 343?
Yes.
That's good. Okay. Thank you. Is there a reason that the bricks and all of that stuff are different colors? I mean, I've been watching this thing go up, and I must call John twice a month every time I saw something that just looked like it was just out of order. Even the exterior brick is 3 or 4 different colors up
I
there.
think the exterior brick is supposed to be patterned. It's supposed to look like a
Why would you do that if you got a campus and you're putting it right next, adjacent to one that's there? It's just, it does not make any sense. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Matter of fact, he met me out there one Sunday, I believe, and we looked at it. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, thank you. Yes, Dr. Wood.
I'm sorry.
On your expenditures page summary, for systems and technology, you had budgeted there $255,000.
That was the original engineer's estimate when the project was first getting underground. So that was done by the design team. So those estimates are design team estimates.
So
moving into the project.
Okay, so when this project was bidded out, RFP, was that a separate item, systems and technology?
Yeah, the construction was bid separate from the furnishing, separate from the systems and technology.
Okay, so when the systems and technology was bidded out, the low bid came in at $255,000?
No, sir. The $255,000 was the engineering architect estimate at the very beginning of the project based on similar buildings and what they'd done in the past, and so that was just a budget number for us to use.
So that $255,000 number wasn't part of the RFP?
Yes, sir.
So I thought you were saying that was separate from construction and furnishing.
The budget numbers were used to make the request for the appropriation amount. I think there's the amount appropriated for the entire project was $8.5 million. It's been through several iterations, so the cost has changed from 2004 to 2013.
Right. Well,
each programming estimate has changed, and that's basically what this is.
So systems and technology was not a separate RFP?
Yes, it was. I'm sorry.
So how much was do you remember how much that RFP?
I didn't get that information for you.
Because I'm just saying that's a $500,000 difference. I was just curious if when it went out for bid, what that bid amount came back in? And does that represent a change order?
There's no change order. There's several different components, if that's what you're asking for. There's several, may have brought it with me.
But wouldn't the budget have been based off of what had come back in an RFP?
No, the original budget estimate typically are based on whatever engineer's estimate. Similar to Churchland Bridge, we don't, based on what we think the bridge is going to look like, how wide it's going to be, what structural components are, you do the engineer's takeoff and do that estimate. And that's the budget number that we give to VDOT and ask them for money, or give to City Council and ask for that appropriation. So that's based on whether it's staff doing the estimate by itself or whether it's staff working with the design team. That estimate is created at the very beginning to figure out what the total cost for the project is going to be, and that leads you to request that funding amount. And so that's what that initial column is.
Okay, well, I would be curious to see if, what the RFP was on that.
I can provide you with all that information.
Yeah. I guess I'd be curious to get an update on the whole project team, the specs. You don't need to bring colors and all that stuff to council, but the place is horrible. I mean, and whoever selected that, I mean, yeah, maybe we ought to wait for closed session. It's just, thank you.
The inside of the building looked great. Everything looked structurally okay. And the technology that I've seen in some of the rooms seems okay too. So are there any problems going on within the building itself that would cause any problems when the people begin to move inside and they work there?
Not that I know of or that can identify, but as you move into a new building, there are always things that may or may not pop up. Once people get in and start using the building, things will come to light. So,
Who was the general contractor again?
A.R. Chesson.
A.R. Chesson. Did he build the first one? The social services
No.
building? Or
No, sir.
didn't it?
It's a much better building.
Okay. Thank you.
Next item on your agenda is a proposed revision to our towing ordinance. As we were preparing the RFP for towing and impoundment services for this fiscal year, we came across in our code, code calls for the consent of the towing advisory board to enter into any towing contract. Now, the towing advisory board members by our city code are appointed by council, and that body has not been active for several years. And so we, as an alternative to either reappointing or appointing new members to the towing board, and going through that whole process before we go forward with our next contract for towing and impoundment, we wanted to give you an alternative, which would be to adopt by reference the state code. So Nita has some information on both codes, and we'll look for your direction and which way to go with that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, council members, let me just give you a little bit of history about the current code. The city ordinance mandates a tow charge for police tows only. And we have the Department of Neighborhood Advancement that also can authorize towing of vehicles. So when we put out the RFP, this little point was not recognized, and we had a conflict in the RFP. So whoever bidding on this would not have a clear code to follow. You have the state code for the DNA tows, and then a city code for the police department tows. So the advisory board actually put in the towing, the charges, but it was only specified for police. And this new RFP did not have any language in it the code doesn't have any language in it for DNA. And also the towing advisory board, as Brandon had mentioned, said that they must advise council before entering into any tow contracts. So we have this advisory board that's not actively meeting. It doesn't have all of the members appointed to the board. And then we have an RFP that we really can't go out for bid on. We cancel the RFP, and we really can't until we deal with the issue of the advisory board and the code.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay.
When you finish that.
All right, okay. Now, the state code has a towing maximum fee for vehicles for passenger cars at $135, but it is silent on the charges for trucks or anything larger than a passenger car. They also have after-hour towing charges, a $25 additional charge option there, and there's no fixed fee for storage charges. Now, the city code has a towing fee maximum of $105. There are no after-hour towing charge options. There's a maximum storage charge of $20 a day, and it has an unusual circumstance charge that's allowed in the city code of $85 an hour. So let's say, for example, a vehicle runs into a house. They would charge the towing fee plus the $85 an hour to remove the vehicle from the house. That would be considered an unusual circumstance. Now, you have a couple of options here. You can keep the city code and you can make the towing advisory board appointments. There's 7 people that are supposed to be on this advisory board, 3 from staff or their designees. You have the police chief, the general services director, and the planning director. But then from the community, you have 2 towing professionals and then 2 citizens. Right now, you only have 1 citizen and 1 tow company representative on the board, so you're short 2 people on this advisory board. So if you bring the towing advisory board back in, they would actually set the fees, and then council would have to approve an ordinance for the new fees. And then we can issue an RFP for towing and impound. Or you could use the state code, and council would approve the ordinances allowing the use of the state code and eliminating an advisory board, and then we could issue an RFP for towing and impound.
Why don't we just, if the state's already got it, man, why don't we just follow the state?
Yeah, I agree.
We don't have to worry about it.
I agree.
I agree too.
That's equally good or bad for everybody.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
I don't think you want the
All right,
towers set fees.
No.
Yeah, staff does recommend going with the state code,
Add it
not
together.
being redundant.
And doesn't that also make us more uniform with our neighbors?
Well, unfortunately, it does not. And here's, but you may not want to be.
Now, don't tell us what Norfolk do. We've heard.
It doesn't matter, because we got a board that doesn't function.
Right.
And we're gonna have
Right.
tow truck owners setting the fees.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
No.
Box in the hen house.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right. Your neighbors have fees up to $285. So,
Neighbors
Yeah,
have what?
Dr. Woody.
your neighbors have fees up to $285.
Yeah, we don't wanna be like that.
So,
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I'm good with the state.
So an RFP was initially issued.
right, but it was canceled because there was one bidder, and that bidder was non-responsive. And what actually precipitated us investigating this code was you guys had a non-agenda speaker come and speak. I think it was a couple of meetings ago, complaining about the rates for the tows, I think with PRHA. So we investigated it, and PRHA is following the state code.
So was this the only issue why the original RFP was pulled? Is this the sole
Well,
issue?
once we started looking at it, the one bidder was non-responsive. We only had one bidder, but both of these, the investigation with the non-agenda speaker happened concurrently with this bid, and we happened to identify all of those once we started looking through it. So we really should not have put out the RFP without bringing this to you first. So that was
So this was the sole issue why it was pulled?
the RFP. No, the
This
bidder,
one.
the one bidder was non-responsive.
So, this question, why was it that it was only one company that bid it? Was there language in there that calls for some type of limitation on who could bid?
No, there was no language in there. One of the things that was in there was a limit to being in the city of Portsmouth. So we.
Right, well, that's what I'm
Right,
saying, so there
right,
was
we did
language,
have-
in
yes,
right.
and
So
we've
my
taken that out.
question, okay, well, why was that language in there from the beginning?
I'm not sure. Well, you know what? It was because in the police department has a policy, and if I'm not mistaken, it said that they wanted the vendors to be in the city of Portsmouth. So that policy is being changed.
Okay, so, right, well, why are we doing that in other types of RFPs where we're limiting the geographical location of bidders?
But that's been taken out of this one. but Mike can answer that question if we do that.
The intent, I assume, would be for response time, so that
Right.
they're not waiting on a Suffolk tow truck to take 30 minutes to
Our
arrive.
boundaries so close, if you're within 2, 3, 4, 5 miles of Portsmouth, I mean,
Right.
boundaries.
But that has been taken out of this particular bid.
Well,
But I don't know about other bids.
Well, I just want to say, that type of language tends to eliminate and it tends to decrease the possible competition. And I don't think that's something we should be promoting, but I would be curious to hear why that type of limited language was in an RFP.
Mayor, members of council, what we do in purchasing is we take the requirements from the department. And when you were looking at the towing company, one of the factors was response time to accidents and things like that. So when they're looking at the distance, they want to make sure that when they need somebody, they can have them come here pretty quickly.
Okay, so based on that, how many eligible companies would there have been anyway to have bid it?
No, I don't know, sir. I don't know.
Well, I think if we're going to be open and transparent with our processes, that type of information should be known before we just put those type of limiting language into an RFP, because like I said, it excludes other possible vendors from
Yes, sir.
participating.
We don't use it routinely. It's when there's a specific request from the departments, that's when that language goes in. In this particular instance, part of the reason is the response time to accidents. To have somebody close, so you don't have no traffic disruption and that kind of stuff. So it's not a routine thing we use in any of our RFPs. In this particular case, it was because of that specific.
It's interesting, how would the police know where a non-Portsmouth vendor is located in relation to the Portsmouth line or the incident, considering, but I just want to express my displeasure with that type of limiting language.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I'm with Dr. Whitaker, but I'm on the other side. Number one, if the police or the fire department need to impound a vehicle, it's either involved in a crime or an accident. You don't want to be tying up traffic and hanging around waiting for the tow truck guy to come from Princess Anne Road. And number two, if you got the little old lady living in Dale Homes whose car gets towed, you don't want her to have to go to some other city to pick up her car. I think that's a terrible burden on our citizens in both cases. I can't imagine that we would have an impound lot outside the city limits.
This may be towing. It doesn't say where they can store it at, does it?
Yes, we actually combined in this contract towing and impoundment, so we're no longer operating an impoundment yard at the city complex. The RFP was for both towing and impoundment.
You're doing it in the city complex?
We're currently, but once we get this new contract in place, we will no longer impound vehicles at the city complex.
Why is that?
Just the cost, the liability to manage it. If we can privatize that, then let's privatize it.
It ought to be in the city.
But the impact, that ought to be in the city.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, sir.
But even still, that's not limited to the towing company being in Portsmouth.
Right.
I can be in Suffolk and have an own land in Portsmouth for an impound lot.
Correct.
So,
And that's why we've taken that language out.
Yeah, I would agree with you there.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions?
So we're going with the state.
And I've talked with you
Sometime
on
near
it.
future.
We'll have that for you for the next meeting.
How many, can we get some idea how many companies are here in Portsmouth?
Okay, we can have that.
Yeah. I mean, normally when you don't get that kind of response, there's something either wrong with the RFQ or with the advertising or something. I mean, because I can imagine only one. I know there's more than one tow company in Portsmouth and not to respond.
And it may have been, using the city code at the 105 may have also been at the parent as well.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that it? All right, I think we got a motion to go into close.
Move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, Section 2.2-3711A.7, and discussion and consideration of prospective candidates for appointments to boards and commissions, and discussion, consideration, and performance of specific appointees or employees of any public body for Section 2.2-3711A.1.
Second.
Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mayor Wright?
Yes.
We are in closed. Thank you.